Hello, everybody. Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
Hello, and I believe this is number 58 of Sounding the Shallows.
It is, and we are always looking for significant weeks, aren't we? And this one is because we're just apparently coming up to Freedom Day in the UK, where suddenly it's up to us whether we do all the things that have been rules and regs. But it's also significant because we've actually been somewhere working, haven't we?
Yeah, we've been to Scargill House, where we lived for a while, to about 10 years ago, and we still go down and work there. But this is the first time we've been able to go since before the first lockdown.
It is, and they're doing so well, but it's a very different world at the moment, isn't it?
It's so organised
It
because
has to
of
be.
regulations. So you've got four people sitting at two tables with loads of space.
Loads of space.
Very well organised.
Yeah.
The food was very good, as it always is. And I think it was what do you think? It was quite a good week.
Well, I think what I felt more than anything is that I was one of this crowd of people, smallish crowd, but tentatively trying to work out how on earth we're going to face any challenges as Christians, as followers of Jesus, in this rather new, rather confused world. Especially as we've had a very confused time, haven't we, just this last week, because our son, who's come back from Poland, has been trying to follow the instructions given by the government. They're very clear.
That's
very
right,
clear.
yeah,
Apparently,
yeah,
what
yeah.
you do is you take a test on day 2 and day 8, and if you want to be released early, you take one on day 5 with these nice private firms that have been selected. It's been utter chaos. Day 2 arrived on day 6. Day 5 didn't arrive at all, and he's finally got to day 10, so he's out of quarantine. But so it's been interesting on all sorts of levels.
I found it quite an angsty week, not because of the people. The people were charming, but lots of things were churning around in me, and I think for me a lot of it was to do with where we go next and what we decide to do. And I think the people who were there, a lot of them were in exactly that position. And I hope what we did and what they did and the conversations we had, I hope they might have helped with that during the week. I don't know. Usually you can't tell until later on.
No.
Whether a week like that has gone well or not.
I think certainly we were feeling, as many people were feeling, that you can't go back and you can't make things how they were before. And if you try and do that, they will be dead because things have changed. Our world has changed, and we have changed. Most people have been taken to a part of themselves they didn't even know existed, and have had to find where what that means in terms of them and God, I suppose. And I think that applies to us as well, really.
A lot of people use the word diminished, don't they?
Yeah.
About situations, projects, themselves. It's quite interesting, that.
Yeah, but there was also a sense of excitement, I think, about the fact that maybe we can look at it differently. Maybe there is another way. Maybe there's a more useful way. Maybe for us there's a new period in our lives that could be an adventure.
It would be nice to have one more, or perhaps not just one more.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 or 3 more adventures. And speaking of adventures, it was interesting. Someone said to me during the week, you and Bridget, you've been all over the world, haven't you? You keep mentioning countries all over the place. Well, I honestly didn't notice that, because we tell a lot of stories, and a lot of the stories are based in places, and you mentioned the place in passing. And I said, well, I suppose we have, really. And when I think about it, we suddenly started travelling, didn't we? When the Sacred Diary came out all those years ago, and suddenly people were asking us to do things.
Well, they were asking you to do them, and I came along. Yeah.
But we went to Australia, didn't we? The very first one.
We went to Australia for a very particular reason the first time. Our daughter was 4, and we just took her, and it was with the Uniting Church, and it was a big celebration, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
But I think it was also probably a realization that if it was you and I going, things were bound to go a bit pear-shaped. And the first thing that happened was when we got off the plane and our luggage hadn't arrived, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a real shock. Everything was going so well.
Well,
Suddenly,
it hadn't begun.
when you haven't got any underwear or any clothes, and I think they gave us $200 or something to go and buy small items, and I ended up famously wearing someone else's shorts. I don't wear shorts, I want to add, but that's what was available. I did, yeah. I did.
But then, of course, if you remember, that was the beginning of it, and then the end of it was where we made real mugginses of ourselves, and I think that's followed us around the world as well, because if you remember, it was a communion service.
That's right. We went to the communion service, and we were rightly or wrongly the special guests, weren't
So
we?
we were right at the front, yes.
So we were to go up first to take our wine and our bread.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, we hadn't understood what was happening, had we?
No.
So I'm not sure if it was you or me who went up first. I have a suspicion it was me. And there was a huge, almost a vat of wine with two handles at the sides.
It was like a punch bowl, wasn't it?
It was like a punch bowl,
just
yeah.
huge, yes.
And I thought, how on earth am I going to lift this thing?
But
and
we thought
drink
that's
out
what
of
you
it?
must do. We thought
I
they must
know.
be very strong in Australia, didn't
So I
we?
lifted it,
Yes.
and Johnny nearly slopped. I was going to say the blood of Christ, but the wine
Yes.
out of the bowl,
I
and
think it
tried
was
to.
probably
And I did
Ribena.
I did take a tiny sip,
Yes.
and I think you followed me.
Well, then I followed, and it was incredibly heavy, as you say.
Yeah.
And I was so anxious and worried about the whole thing. And then we went off the platform first and went and sat down.
And then
had
we
to
watched
watch
as
about
the others walked up one by one
400 people.
and took little cups and got some wine out of the huge
No, they
thing.
took their bread and
Oh, they
dipped
did their
it in
bread.
the-
Right, they dipped their bread in it. Oh, it was so embarrassing.
I
having
think it
lifted
was
that
a
thing
good
up.
example of
Yeah.
the way that we would. You said about travelling around the world
Yeah.
as though we sort of trotted around bestowing good things, but I think our way always seems to be to
Yeah, it's
to
probably just as
stumble
well.
along.
I do remember this. You know, they talk about imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
and I know that when we were the main speakers at the conference they'd organised, and I remember us standing on the platform and me thinking, "What on earth are we doing here?"
Yeah.
There's no reason to suppose that we have any more right to be here than anyone else, but there we were, and we jolly well did it, didn't we?
Yeah, and of course what it did was trigger off lots of other things, that one little book, in terms of a different sort of travelling, wasn't it? I mean, there were always we felt that imposter syndrome thing, because there wasn't, it was very hard to understand quite why we were in places, but we met the most extraordinary people, didn't we? I mean,
We
the
did.
first
We
time
met
we
some
went to
wonderful
Bangladesh,
people,
and we met our sponsor child there, because we were with World Vision, weren't we? We met some remarkable people.
Yeah, we did.
And also little photos get so deep in your head, don't they? I was thinking of do you remember when we were in that village high up in Tuatol, and we were to meet a sponsor child, not ours, but a sponsor child. And do you remember she had been taught to write her name?
That's right, yeah. I remember her mother, first of all, brought all the best, her plastic tea set out for us, didn't she? It was the best thing she got, and she was so proud of it. Yeah, the daughter.
And then
learned
as
to
she
write her
started
name.
to write her name, this tiny little house was suddenly crammed with women. They were particularly women,
Yeah.
weren't they? And just right round her.
All
and
looking over her shoulder.
Yes, and she very carefully wrote her name in your book, so you would remember her name.
And they stood silent as the name was written in awe, because she could write her name.
Yeah.
And there it was suddenly written on this piece of paper.
Yeah.
And I think we didn't really quite understand the significance of that, the hugeness of it.
No.
One of the things that World Vision was doing was making things like that possible education.
Well, they were. And do you remember the other meeting, which was with women, which was also when we went to Bangladesh, and they had been they'd been enabled to set up a sort of loan project, so they could together collectively they could save money, and then one by one they would be able to access that money in order to buy things that they needed. Do you remember? And we went to this meeting, and it was the most extraordinary thing because the women don't normally have the chance to speak, and there were loads of them, and the men, if you remember, were standing all the way around the edge.
Right.
And then you asked them, do you remember, you said, why does World Vision do this? Because of course Bangladesh not being a Christian country, there's no way that World Vision could in any way, what's the proper word? Where you spread,
well, there was no
spread the gospel
intention of
in any way.
evangelizing in Muslim countries.
No,
they
or
didn't
Hindu
do
countries or
that.
whatever.
All you could do was answer questions.
So you asked the
asked
women,
them.
didn't you? Do you remember? You
Yeah.
said, why?
Why do you think World Vision does this
Yeah.
for you?
And do you remember there was the most lovely chattering? These
Yeah.
women were so excited by the question which was translated for them, and they were like birds in their saris, so many different colours. We called the book we wrote "Colours of Survival," didn't we?
That's
Because
right, yeah.
within the poverty, they were so bright and so beautiful. And then finally, one brave person said, "Can you remember?"
Through the interpreter, said, World Vision loves us.
Yeah.
And possibly you might think that sounded a little thin, but actually I thought that was wonderful, that they had understood that this group of people from all over the world actually really loved them and cared for them.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you translate that into God being in the centre of it, but at the time, I still don't think that was the most important thing. But it was one of those wonderful moments. There were lots of them.
Yeah, but also that's a pretty good lesson for us coming out of this situation, isn't it? You know, that if people who have not felt loved and who have not felt cared for, and they meet people who are followers of Jesus, and you were able to say, you know, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah.
If people really felt so loved and so cared for, without really understanding the motivation. I think that would be...
I think a lot of people actually have come to faith because of what people do for them. I was also remembering going to South Africa the first time. You came...
I didn't come the first
with
time.
the
I
children,
came
didn't you? The second time.
Yeah.
I went the year before the elections and before Mandela came into power, and I remember this person phoning me at home, do you remember, and saying, will you come to South Africa and do a tour? And I think I had a better attitude then than I had now, because it was an unconscious one. I just thought, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And I said, I haven't got a word for South Africa. I don't, and I wanted to say, I'm not that kind of speaker or preacher. And she said, we don't want you to have a word for South Africa. Everybody's got a word for South Africa. We lie awake at nights, frightened. We want you to make us laugh. We want you to give us some happiness. And at that point, I thought, well, I can't really say no to that. And so I went, and I found myself in the middle of an incredibly tense situation over there. Yeah. And then we all went.
Well, we did, and it was still
later.
pretty tense.
Yeah,
I mean, Johannesburg was terribly frightening, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But we did see again, we met some incredible people. And we went into Soweto, didn't we? Do you remember? And
I remember that very well.
We met some extraordinary things happening in the middle of this township. It's always been like that. Always been like that. You go to a country that has a reputation for being something. You maybe even are connected with some big movement that is doing, and then you meet a person who is just doing something amazing. yeah, I mean, oh, goodness me, Adrian, this is setting up so many memories. I'm sorry, but just one more from my point of view. Do you remember? Because I remember you coming home one day, having met somebody, I can't remember where, and I can't remember what the meeting was, and you said, I have a feeling I've said yes to going to Bolivia.
That's
and
right.
I
did.
thought
Yeah,
it was.
had.
I thought it
Yeah.
was in Europe. I never really
right.
thought where Bolivia was. And if you remember, come on, you remember we had to actually look it up on the map.
Yeah, we did. No, I had no idea where it was, and we had always thought we'd never go to South America because there was no reason
why would
to,
we?
as far as
Yes.
we could see.
Yeah.
And that's where we did some work with Toy
Yeah.
Box, who worked with street kids,
Yeah.
and sat in the dark on very dangerous streets talking to children, and
Yeah, one
yeah,
memory from there. I mean, for me, one memory that's just come into my mind is we climbed in Lima. All the poorest people live at the very top of the hills, and I remember us climbing up and up and up and up.
that was in
and
Peru,
up.
wasn't it? Was it Lima?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, it's all right.
that was in Peru.
Yeah. Go on.
Before we went to
Yeah,
Bolivia.
yeah. No,
Sorry.
it's all right.
Anyway, I didn't remember
Yeah.
the country.
It's all right. Go on.
But do you remember we climbed up and up and up and up, right?
I
And
do.
we came to this man in this tiny building.
Yeah.
And there was this extraordinary megaphone outside his building. And I mean a megaphone, not a megaphone, something that was going to broadcast. Loudspeaker, thank you. And it was going to broadcast over the valley.
Yeah.
And some American evangelists had brought him a great stack of tapes that he could put on, Christian tapes and evangelistic tracts that would bellow out over the valley. And this man said, "But I make porridge for the children in the morning. I think that's what I'm supposed to do." And these children would come every morning, and he would make porridge, and he would ladle it into their bowls, and knew that the children in that area were eating.
Yeah.
And there was something to do with the practical love of that food and the blasting out over the valley of the love of Jesus. That's just
It was
another.
very moving indeed. Yeah, it was. And you can't stop the memories once they start. You remember in Zamtan, a town in Zambia, where we had gone to put some facts together about AIDS, so we could the work with AIDS, we could come back and help to raise money for it. And the first thing I remember about that were those two lads. Can you remember their names?
Of course I can. They were called Laxon and Philemon.
That's right. Yeah.
And they'd been looking after themselves since they were about 8, and because their parents had died. I mean, this was a very typical situation, but their grandparents had not really wanted them or been able to cope with them, and had sent them out every time there was any food, if you remember, and now they were living on their own. What do you remember particularly about
Well,
them?
I remember they very kindly offered me a share in their food, and the food was a boiled rat. And I think they offered me
Just
the head.
No, there was only the head
Was
left.
it the head?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I declined as politely as good. I also remember that we wanted to give them something. They were very proud, very poor.
And also, that wasn't the policy
Wasn't the
to
policy
give
of World
actual
Vision.
gifts to people, because
And
you would be singling out one family and not another.
but in particular, I wanted to give them a football.
Well, you phoned home and you were talking to one of our sons.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, and he said, "Well, just give them a football, for goodness sake." So we went and bought a football
And some blankets.
and gave it to them. One of the things that was so interesting and again very moving about some of the people we met in Bangladesh and in Zambia was the natural courtesy which said that nobody makes a fuss over the presents they're given, because if you do, it means you think more about the presents than the people who've given them to you.
We met that again and again
We
and
did,
again,
yeah,
and it was
yeah.
disconcerting at first, wasn't it?
Well, it
because
looked
we
as
thought,
though we'd been-
what have we gone
That's
wrong?
right,
You know,
yeah,
how can
yeah.
we have got this so wrong that we've given some present that must be completely the wrong thing? And then we
Yeah.
realised, yes, they would take it Even children would take it and put it to one side. But those lads, they walked 9 kilometres to school in bare feet every day, didn't they?
They wanted to be, one wanted to be a policeman, the other wanted to be an air pilot.
Yeah.
Whether they ever achieved their ambition, we don't know. We found meeting person after person with AIDS quite wretched, but we learned after a while, I think, didn't we, that wasn't our job, wasn't to be there and to get lost in our own feelings, because we had a small but specific job to do, which was collecting. I think, looking back over all these places we've been, I mean, the thing about it is, when we started, people were talking about inviting us to do things for them, and that was nice and exciting. But what a gift it has been for us. A multicoloured tapestry of memories from all over the world, with some wonderful positive characters. One or two really not positive characters, I might add, but we won't go into them. But yeah, a great privilege. And I know all people working for charities say that, and often they just mean we got a free trip to wherever it was. I don't know. But I think it's been a wonderful gift to us. Will we go anywhere else?
I don't know. But we did sit in the sunshine this evening.
We did.
And it's a glorious evening.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I was, that felt pretty good as well. But certainly, what have we learned? What would we say? Resilience, courage, never giving up. Do you remember a group of children singing "Never Give Up"?
Never give up.
And for this country who's never been hit by anything like this pandemic before, maybe we can learn from Laxon and Philemon and from all the others that you don't give up. You look to the next day.
Well, either you give up and you just crumble.
Yeah.
Or you say, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to make things better for
9
myself.
kilometres in bare feet every day to school and back.
I hope they made it to their jobs.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's rather nice thinking back, isn't it?
Of course it is.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.